who gets the job, I would say. I mean, it's not a beauty contest, it's a context decision. So the person who fits the context is going to get the job. They say, want to have a growth leader. Okay, 5% growth or 50% growth or 200% growth. It's very different people. And it's not always like the one who drives the most growth who gets the job, but the one who fits that context.
Navigating an SAP transformation? We get it. By day, we work hands-on with people like you across the globe. By night, we share what actually works. Welcome to Transformation Every Day with Alexander Greb and Johannes Langguth, where your complex transformation becomes clear, actionable, and achievable.
Welcome, everybody. Today's guest is Salen, Executive Search Consultant at Spencer Stuart. She spent 20 years in tech at HP, Gartner, SAP, Fioneer, and then she moved into the business of advising boards on who should get which job. So when she talks about who gets the top jobs in tech, she's not reading from a position spec. She knows the business underneath it. And a lot of what she says is not about the top job at all. It's about the 15 years before it, like why being excellent at your work stops being enough at a certain point, why she tells people to write down every business outcome they deliver, starting now, why sideways moves often beat upward ones, and why low ego is something clients now ask for by name. So this episode is for two kinds of people, those with their eye on the top level and those who want to accelerate their career. All things you can start with on Monday. So, my name is Alexander Greb, and this is Transformation Every Day. You're getting broiled without really noticing it. So, but we do not want to broil you because we are so happy that we have you here. It's Salen.
It's a pleasure to be here.
We have a long history through several companies. You have a very, very interesting path in your career. You started, not really you started, but you spent quite some time in the SAP ecosystem. Then you moved into executive search because I think headhunting is the least name that you probably want to hear. Tell us a little bit about your journey.
Sure.
What you learned in each of your positions and what made this kind of final move to executive search?
Happy to. I spent about 20 years in the technology industry, starting actually with HP, then moving on to Gartner, and then to New Relic, and then to SAP, then to SAP Fioneer as the spun off the financial services capabilities. And they are very different companies in terms of size, scope, focus, pace,
culture,
everything.
Yeah.
But I think the thing that has been connecting tissue or red thread throughout the entire journey has been doing things that really excites me, joining teams and managers that really excites me. I've been extremely lucky. I've had a lot of great leaders in my life. Everything from my first leader in HP down in Italy to many leaders I had and worked with in London and also here out of Switzerland. It's been local to global remits, and that exposes you to a lot of people and cultures and ways of succeeding. So it's been really, really cool. And I think when this opportunity came along, knowing that I think everyone has that experience of there are great managers out there, great leaders that you work with that really had an impact and made a difference for you.
Yeah.
And this provided an opportunity to help identify them and develop them. And that really sounded interesting.
So
in great places.
Let me jump in there because did these kinds of personal experience that you made yourself with leadership, good and bad, because I think everybody has experienced both sides. Did they also influence, let's say, the way you approach from the perspective of when you are looking, for example, for the CEO of a company, when you say like, okay, these would be the kinds of traits or kind of personalities that I would like to have or would have had as a boss if I would be in that place?
Well, I mean, so we work with, our target is really leadership advisory on developing great leaders and great leadership teams. That's kind of the CEO board and the C-suite. So we focus on the top. And the point there is, it doesn't really matter what I like; it's what they like.
Mm.
So we have to always get into the mind of that company, that board, that CEO, that CIO or technology leader, and understand what is it that they need, and not so much what they like. We do our best to coach our clients to start with what they want to get out of this position. What's the goal to achieve here, rather than starting with a lot of resumes. So it's not so much like what is the responsibility, but what do you want this person to achieve. And more often than not, I'm surprised how little they have thought about it. They have an idea,
Yeah.
but when we try to get really clear about it, then it crystallizes for them too, and that makes our job much better and a better experience also for candidates.
Is it like this that there are, let's say, two major approaches that companies do when looking for, let's say, board members? Like the one having that kind of inside out approach and looking like, hey, come on, we want to have these kinds of people, while others make more the other way around, that they say, like, we are in a situation or in a challenge with our company, like A, B, C, D. So we basically would need persons who are like this and that.
Yes. So both those examples you mentioned talks about this kind of what the kind of person we want, and we try to coach them on what is it we want this person to achieve, and then we also advise them on what kind of characters do we see achieving those kind of results. So we help them develop the idea of what they're thinking about. But yes, certainly, some comes in with this exactly what we want. We encounter people who want unicorns and people who want something that seems like everyone else is asking for, therefore they should too.
Mm.
But by digging into their context, their culture, their goals, their challenges, and what's working great, we understand better what they might need in that such a position.
And is it like this that they are actually, in most cases, able to articulate what they want? Because I think this is something that you, or let's see from my experience, that is something that many struggle in, that really articulate what kind of people they want, because they think they want to have these kinds of traits, these kinds of things, but they mean in the end something completely else.
When it's a simple, like for the case of our shared background, if there's a simple, like we need a technology leader, transformation
Yeah.
leader, um, in this role, then I mean, okay, the title can sometimes misguide what we're looking for. We try to make them look beyond the titles and just again focusing on what they would need to achieve. Um, and then, like as an example, not so long ago, just a few weeks ago, we were speaking with a bank about their technology leader that they were going to hire for, and they wanted someone who was really strong in AI. And we got the position spec that they thought it should look like. And the first thing we went into ask was, what do you want this person to accomplish with AI? Is it just automating the back end? Is
Mhm.
it like the actual technology stack to AI enable this, or do you want to AI enhance all your processes and substitute perhaps some of your people with that, or you're trying to develop new banking products with AI that are AI enabled or AI founded on AI, or you're trying to create better experiences for the customers or employees with AI. Like, what are you trying to achieve?
Mhm.
And it turns out that they were interested in actually having AI enhanced customer engagements to help their advisors and to create that better engagement. But then we went back to the position spec they had provided us with, and that didn't really reflect what they were
Mhm.
asking for. So then we advised them on, okay, those kind of leaders that have experience that tend to come from these backgrounds. They tend to have these kind of experiences. How do you think about that? Would that resonate with the organization? So we try to guide our clients as much as we can on this. And yeah, they tend to find it quite helpful because obviously we have the luxury of having a broader view. And I mean, we engage with a lot of clients who have felt and looking for similar things, but also we speak with a lot of candidates that not might be right for the very client we're working for, but still we discover them and see how they got there. So does that answer your question?
Absolutely. And but what I ask myself about your answer, of course, is, are there some different approaches when you, for example, want to hire top level versus mid-level management?
Yeah.
Or
So
are these kind of best practices that you should have in all these kinds of areas where you try to get
yeah.
people?
When I speak with candidates about their journeys, I think there's a common thread I observe, which is um, in the beginning of our careers, we need to be great at exactly what we're doing, more
Yeah.
experts. And the higher up you go, the more you're expected to connect better with people around you. It's always a benefit. No one will blame a new starter for connecting great with whole organizations, but at a certain level, it starts being expected of you. And to have that enterprise end-to-end thinking to get people along the bus.
Yeah.
So a lot of these soft skills are becoming essentially more important. I think that's how the higher up you go, there's expected to understand also the other departments or the other functions that you might not be responsible for, but you engage with and you impact them.
Yeah.
So if you think about the technology leaders, this is something we see a huge change. Even in the most conservative industries and the most conservative countries, is a massive change of this. It's definitely not enough to just understand technology. You need to understand the business. And for the same goes for functions like the CHRO or CFO. When we get those requirements, they want a CFO or CHRO who really has experience and understanding for how do you use technology to enhance the performance of their function, and definitely engage well with the business.
That goes quite into the direction that I quite often observe, for example, with consulting companies. But it's not only isolated with consulting companies. This also goes a lot into, let's say, mid-size companies in that area, that people rise up. People are, for example, excellent consultants. They are wonderful in getting customers. They are wonderful in getting complex transformations, projects, programs managed. And with those, they rise through the ranks, and suddenly they become managers, or they become even
Yeah.
CEOs in that way. And it's quite often a natural process that the best consultant then gets chosen to become, in the end, the managing director or the CEO of an organization. And turned out that it may not always been such a good idea to do exactly that. Are there some kind of mechanisms that you observe that organizations try to have not to fall in these kind of traps? Hi there. Quick break for a short message before we go right back to the episode. Enjoying the insights and stories on transformation every day? Want to make sure you never miss an episode packed with practical tips and best practices from the SAP world, featuring conversations with some of the most interesting people in the SAP universe? Then hit that subscribe button on your favorite podcast platform, whether it is Apple, Spotify, or any other you use. And if our podcast brings you value, we would be incredibly grateful if you could leave us a 5-star review and share it with your friends and colleagues. Your support means the world to us. Thanks so much, and happy listening.
Your experience resonates a lot with what we see. I think that's something I also discovered going into this industry. I think I always appreciated people who had both expertise and the people skills, but entering this role and seeing what I've seen from this perspective, I don't think I understood before exactly how much those people, soft stuff, actually makes a difference. I mean, if you think about it, someone who is extremely good at what they're doing, as they grow after, as you say, the top performer. But if they're not genuinely curious and interested about setting their team up for success, then you're just dependent on their expertise, not the whole team's expertise. How do you get the most out of your team to contribute towards the organization? And also, this part of CEO I spoke with not so long time ago, where he always looks at this biodiversity of his team. So it should represent the market you're addressing. It should represent the various kind of um, conditions that your company might get into. There's people who are exceptional at high growth environments, or people who are exceptional at turnaround situations, or people who are exceptional at maintaining status quo. But you want a variety of that in your team, and leaders who have the soft part of that and actually enabling the team and understanding what makes them ready for whatever may come, which is definitely a necessity in today's world. They tend to outperform the people who are not, and that we see consistently. And you have to get people along on that journey. If you have to reverse the bus to get them on the bus all the time, you lose a lot of time.
Definitely. You mentioned something which, when you said like the thing that companies actually want when they hire senior personnel, it's all about the mandate in the end. What you, of course, have to get clear. What do you actually expect from that person? What's your motivation to get that person, and so on and so on. I think from my perspective, when I look back at people, for example, being at the company, then moving out again after a short period, in most of the cases, it's about the mandate, which was maybe unclear, or the people had not complete the same alignment about that, the goals were different, and so on. Do you see this as one of the bigger problems when hiring, that the mandate is not clear, and especially what should people who are going into that process of getting hired concerning the mandate, which in the end, of course, is there also about their own security or the chance and the opportunities to succeed in that role. How should they make clear that the mandate does not have any room for misunderstandings?
It is a challenge, but I think I would almost separate those two parts in terms of the person when people leave after a while versus the mandate. But so let's start with why when they leave and they felt that the mandate was not clear. So our data actually shows that the number one reason that when people leave within the first 18 months or so, the number one reason they leave, I think the numbers are around 70% of those who leave, they just didn't fit in here.
Yeah.
It was a cultural misalignment. It can have to do with pace, that they just didn't feel like a part of the team. So to address that challenge, the customers and the candidates, they need to have a shared language of what the culture is like and what the candidates are like. So in our process, we would do that. We would do an environmental assessment, culture assessment to understand what are the majority of behaviors and motivations and strengths in this leadership team and organization. And then we will also do the same for the candidates. So and we do it with the same foundational methods. So when they discuss about what they're like, there's a shared understanding. They don't have to be the same, but they need to be aware.
Yeah.
That's a part of that kind of guiding both the candidates and the clients on making sure that they know who they're hiring and they know what they're walking into. And that reduces that attrition within the first 18 months that people in general want to avoid, both the company and the candidate. So it's a mutual shared interest there. So we find that there's quite a good appetite for getting that help. It's a bit more complex when assignments are highly confidential. Then we need to make use of some other tools which we have, which are really helpful. But in general, it's a really important part to address the challenge you're experiencing of not walking into where you don't feel needed. But then on the mandate side, and as we spoke about before, we're trying to coach our clients on what are you trying to achieve, so that is clear. So we want to have a discussion on in 12 months, if this person has done something, what will make you extremely happy and pleased with the appointment, versus if they haven't achieved it, you will not be. That will be considered a failure. We try to narrow it down to just a few things, just so the goal is crystal clear on both sides. Then we can look at that achievement within 12 months, 18 months, 24 months, whatever timeline this client is working on. But we want to have a clarity on this. And there can be some challenges in this conversation, both on the culture as well as what do you need in this, for some reasons. Common challenges when the board or the executive team are not fully aligned. And we discover that as we speak with the various executives and board members of what they're looking for. We often then present back what we have learned. And we will highlight these are some things you guys are not quite aligned on. You might want to agree on what you think about this. That has to be a very appreciated experience for everyone I work with. But it's not so common that we have these conversations in our everyday life. Even people we work with every day don't necessarily have these conversations. That's really helpful. The other part, which is a very unique situation, is when you deal with founder-led organizations or family-owned companies, or with an executive team that has been in the same company for 20 years. It's a very unique situation, and I think a book that a colleague of mine wrote called "Fish Can't See Water," which I think is really telling about that situation. So we need to help them understand, even like the incumbent board or executive team. We need to almost give them an outside in view of this is how people experience your culture. And it's a fascinating journey, but it's a domain of knowledge and experience all by itself. And we have a dedicated practice for this for reasons.
And I think there are not many things which have a bigger gap between how you more or less perceive your own culture in a leadership position and how it's perceived from the outside.
Right.
Especially when you are in this kind of the bubble that you described, and you have worked like for 30 years together, and your culture more or less become a blueprint of yourself.
Yeah.
And you collected in the end people around you which are like yourself. It becomes, of course, more and more difficult to get senior leadership from outside, which may turn the fate of your company in a different way, because you probably have to transform. How can organizations who are, for example, stuck in a way like this, use exterior talent to transform themselves, to get themselves on a different level, while not getting into that trap of trying to get away from the talent within a short period, because this kind of culture gets this kind of mechanism again to get rid of that kind of foreign body which intruded your organization and your culture?
A great question. And there's some interesting research around this. For example, so the point being, what is the ask? Is the client or the organization trying to change culture? Or again, it's probably about the outcome. They want something else. They want less employee attrition. They want happier customers. They want more growth. Whatever they may need to. Products faster to market, be more innovative. Whatever the mandate or the outcome they're looking to have is, if they find that culture, and we could define it as how things get done around here, is a part of what they want to address. Having someone come in from the outside is a really good idea. So there's some research that is interesting, such as what is the critical mass you need of different for it to actually have an impact. And it's says like about a third of the team needs to be different for it to start having actual impact. If it's just one person in a 10 people executive team, it will be 9-1 all the time. But if it's 3 or 4 different people versus 6, then it's a dialogue. There can be a minority, but there needs to be some clout there. That's what we see. And there's not just our research, but other research too, kind of visualizing this. For the same reason that when companies wanted to have the diversity card, it doesn't help to hire one person just because they're diverse.
Yeah.
It has to be a reason for it and a mandate to drive that change. So when you have some clout around that differentness, if there's a cultural one or an experience one or a speed one, if there's some clout, that tends to bring things forward. And to your point on top versus bottom cultures, I think this kind of having a conscious conversation about what are we and where do we want to be, doesn't happen all that often, I've realized.
Mhm.
And again, the shared language, right? Because when someone says, I would like us to be more innovative, and someone else says, yes, me too. But
Nobody
what
can
do
disagree there. Yeah.
exactly? It's
Yeah.
just like, the fortune tellers, as long as they use
Exactly.
high level enough verbs, everyone can relate to it.
Yeah.
So we try to help to get very specific around this. We also, when it comes to making teams work more effectively together, if they want transformation, it can also, sometimes the problem is not the people in the room, but how they work together. So there we also try to just have a very purposeful and conscious conversation about what's working, what's not. What do you mean with all these things? And without exception, we uncover misunderstandings.
Yeah.
And very often, just that clarity and having a conscious conversation about what we mean about this and facilitate that alignment makes a world of difference. And this is also very interesting when you have M&A situations, right? You
Yeah,
have two,
absolutely. Two
so
different cultures coming together.
yeah. And if it's a merger between equals, it tends to be a little bit more easy. But if it's an acquisition, and there will be a reason for that acquisition, how do you make sure you keep the people you want to keep and change the teams you want to change? Again, having an awareness around that is fascinating to go through, especially at the board level.
Is it sometimes when you see mandates being discussed that probably sometimes, especially because of in mergers situation and so on, these are left intentionally vague because talking about this would mean probably spending more time that in many cases you probably have because you are talking about almost philosophical things about your identity that you want to follow. And so it's thought, let's keep it a little bit vague. And this may be a good idea in the first step because they think in the end this will help us to get onto something which brings us further. And is this, in your experience, actually such a good idea when people are not able to be aware and be clear about a common strategy to go further, to really follow this route?
Yeah, so when we encounter vagueness in this,
Yeah.
it tends to be, as what you spoke about, where they're not fully aligned or not completely clear of what they're looking for. And they don't want to exclude options, which is a good strategy. So they're also the process when they're assessing people and meeting people becomes also a learning journey. It's like, you go out when you try your different clothes on, just feel how it fits and if you think this is going to work or not. So I think that's one part. So ideally, they're at least clear on the outcome. But even that can be through that when we have these situations. I'm working on a situation like that right now. They're pretty clear what they want this person to achieve, but they're not entirely nailed down how they're going to get there, exactly what's possible. And through us, they're meeting various CEO candidates. They're discovering that what the different candidates think is the art of the possible is different, and they're assessing of how does that meet their view. And some of them are challenging their views, and some are encouraging their views and even pushing it further. And the other part is like how to reach it. And this is more like in general, when companies appoint executives, internal or external, doesn't matter. It's not just the experience they want, or they want someone who they can work with, someone who they believe in, but they're hiring not just a person, they're hiring a plan and a new extensions to their team that's going to enhance it somehow.
Yeah.
But it's like the person in the plan and all the abilities they bring from agility to learn, etc. So sometimes it's vague, but they're also learning through the process. But when I've experienced that customers are a bit vague of exactly what they're looking for, it's a learning process for them. And sometimes it can be not intentionally, but that it's vague because they don't really know what they're looking for, what they're dealing with. I mean, we had this with Our was CTO, I believe, and we were asked to help them find a new one. But as we did our research, we saw they've actually had, I think, 4 CTOs in 5 years. And we're like, maybe the person was not the problem.
Yeah.
There's something else here. And so we did not end up finding a CTO for them, but we did end up working with them on kind of a better kind of communication and team effectiveness, essentially, at the executive team. And it turns out that the expectations were totally unrealistic. And also the communication was not particularly effective.
When we switch from the demand side to the supply side, and you have these kinds of job that you have to staff with people, of course you do not have just that one candidate, but you have a certain portfolio of candidates. And tell me something about the process. Imagine you have like 5 strong candidates for a senior role, all with great CVs. What does really decides in the end in a best practice process? Because I think we all are sure that there are different processes or different approaches. In a best practice approach, who gets the job?
So the process and who gets the job are maybe 2 different questions, but so who gets the job, I would say, I mean, it's not a beauty contest, it's a context decision. So the person who fits the context is going to get the job. So and again, you can look at this, they say, want to have a growth leader. Okay, 5% growth or 50% growth or 200% growth. It's very different people. And it's not always like the one who drives the most growth who gets the job, but the one who fits that context. What is growth for them? And then again, all the situational things that impact the success and the challenges of this individual getting into the organization. And in general, so again, at senior executives level, it's not going to be a difference of who knows this specific area, who knows technology the best. It doesn't matter if they know one candidate knows 98% of all technologies out there, one knows 99% of all the technologies out there. That's going to not make the difference of who's most effective in the job. It's going to be the people who are best at getting people on the bus, who can understand the business better, who can lead change through and develop and enable their teams. There's all these other things that weigh in. So even if their CVs are really strong in all 5, the person who actually can drive the change is probably in that kind of context that they're experiencing, that's going to be the one. Then in terms of the process of getting to those 5 or making the selection, I mean, we look at several different things from a process perspective. Of course, experience matter. It's rare that just because someone is able to enable people and have a wonderful character and you can deal with ambiguity and super creative, but if they don't have any domain expertise for the role that they're talking about, any industry expertise for the role they're talking about, does not have any scale relevance for the role they're talking about, it's unlikely and probably unwise that this person is going to get the job. So there needs to be some connecting tissue. But in general, I'd say companies are happy to leave out something out. Someone who knows the industry very well and knows that kind of gone through the journey the company is supposed to go through, but might not have that kind of role before, step-up candidates, whatever it might be. So that's one part of kind of this experience perspective, that it does matter to some extent, of course. When it comes to the other part, you want to look at the leadership capabilities. So how do they drive results? How do they act? How do they build strategies? How is this conceptual thinking? How do they self-analyze? All these things are kind of below the surface. That we then go and analyze to see how that's going to fit with the situation they're in. And specifically when it comes to step-up candidates, or all candidates, but in particular step-up candidates, we want to look at their ability to succeed in new environments. And that we assess both with how have they done that before, as well as assessing conceptual situations or artificial situations, or we expose them to situations that they have not yet been in, to see how do they go about that. And we have an incredible database on how really high-performing CEOs or leaders perform well. And we benchmark these people, step-up people, but any kind of people, against these top performers to see how do they align. And then comes to when people want to take a decision, We want to make them aware of what they're dealing with, where there are spikes, where there might be some risks, so they can take an understanding. For example, if, let's say, one individual, doesn't matter if they're step up or not, their strength is not in strategical thinking, unlikely, but let's say a CEO that we're assessing, like strategic thinking is not there. Not, it's good. They can't be lousy at anyone at that level, but it's not their strength. But maybe we know that their chief strategy officer or chief transformation officer or CFO or someone else is exceptionally strong at this. That's a good match if it brings this person brings something else that the rest of the executive team does not have. So it's contextual. And then, of course, the last part is this cultural alignment to make sure it's a good alignment of what the culture they have that they want to reinforce, or a culture they want to create that they want to add to.
Based on what you said, of course, there are elements that I would call mandatory, that you of course have to bring with you, and there are some which may be like the icing of the cake, of course, on top, the possibilities for you to differentiate even at that level, where of course these kinds of people are highly trained, highly experienced individuals, and so on. Is there in these kinds of areas of experience, behavior, and judgment a possibility there where you say, okay, these are the topics where you, based on the on the candidates that you have and your experience, there is still this kind of soft spot where people can differentiate and where people can step up and really make a difference, that makes them attractive and winning above all the rest? Or do you say, okay, we are already at the level where all the traits are so optimized generally in most of the people, that there is no really differentiator anymore?
It's very dependent on the situation. Sorry to give a consultant answer here, but we do see trends across various roles. And for CEO, this will be obviously leading through ambiguity. And we need to, when we assess them, we look for, unless the client strongly advises against this, but they don't tend to, we want to understand that they have a great agility, curiosity, and interest to learning. They work well with the teams, and leaders in general today have the expectations to share something about themselves. I mean, a CEO 20 years ago would probably be very private. Today, there's an expectation of the leaders to be a bit authentic, and people want to understand who they are. At least
almost an entertainer, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we do see a difference across the world on this. When leadership expectations are different around the world, it is cultural. But in the part of the world where we sit, that's definitely expected to a large extent. When it comes to, for example, for technology leaders, for sure, their exposure to AI differentiates. It's for no one is surprised, but this exposure and expertise in it, and having actual hands-on experience of implementing, scaling, driving, testing, failing, succeeding with AI is definitely a high demand. If you have the ability to get good at that, it will differentiate you. Because it's a lot of talk, but people have actually done it. It's not as many. And the funny thing is, I would always say, if you're a technology leader, say, but my organization is not ready for it, or they don't seek it, or they don't have appetite for it, don't have budget for it, they do probably. Probably you're not in the conversation, or they don't think you can do it. So, I mean, if you don't provide it, they will ask someone else for it. So I encourage every leader to tamper with it and make sure they get experience in that.
Based on these parameters, there probably is quite often the situation that you have certain candidates and there is a safe and a bold option.
Yeah.
Who wins in the end? Probably not always the same part, but what kind of things determine if the safe decision will win or if the bold decision will win?
Yeah, it's a great question. in general, when things are going well, companies tend to hire for more of the same. When the platform is really burning, they tend to be more open to look at new ways, and which is also what we would advise. If you want change, if you want different outcomes, you're going to need to have different inputs.
Naturally.
So that goes also with here, and I think people underestimate the difference of a true top performer versus an average. I mean, a true top performer, a true transformer, does not just deliver the results. They change how you do things. They change what you're doing, like what you're focusing on. They change the way people think and what people understand what's possible versus someone just delivering the outcomes. So I think that's when people want to have the bold decision, when they are open to that. I want to test. When you say you want to transform or something really different, how far are you willing to go? And do you understand what that means to avoid kind of the beach body trap where everyone wants to say they want to be fit for the summer, but no one wants to give up on the muffin? So I want transformation, but I don't want to change anything I do.
Sure.
So this is the part that we need to have a conversation with our clients on. When they say, I want to transform, we're like, really? You want to go from a larva to a butterfly? With all the pains that you would have completely different afters. There are people who are very good at doing that and love doing that, but just be clear of what you want. So we don't have, to your point, the mandate problem. So there's not a misconception. But I think there is sometimes not a misunderstanding, but people might not appreciate what a true transformer can achieve. A good one, not a probably not a brute one who just cuts everything and think that's going to be enough, but a true transformer who has impact on the whole company, the whole business.
When we look into the candidates that you have to work with on a daily basis, and of course you want to, since most of our listeners are in a similar situation, how do I make a career? What are the topics that I should focus on, especially when they step up the ladder and they realize, probably many cases quite late, that, there are now different traits necessary to be good at. What is, based on your experience, and we are talking here, of course, about the generalists on the one side, specialists on the other side, and so on. What are the typical paths that you see based on your experience that are open and still open to people? And what are the typical advice that you can give to people who say, like, okay, I'm now stepping up from either an operational role, like a consultant, like a sales executive, up into a management role, and those who are on the middle management area and now step up into a more senior or executive management role?
So one part would be ruthlessly outcome focused. That's one part. Is for all the if we have any people in the beginning of their career listening, like document all the business impact you have, and do it always, because you will forget in 5 years what happened 5 years ago. I can't even remember what I had for dinner last Tuesday. So make sure they document that in the resume or somewhere else. Because that, again, we spoke about before, people don't hire a title, they hire an outcome, a problem to be solved. And if you have done that repeatedly through your career, it proves your ability. So the outcome focus is one. The other part, I would say, whether late in your career or early, doesn't really matter. But if you want to go up, double down on that enterprise thinking. So if you're in technology, buddy up with your business counterparts, see if you can join customer meetings or strategy meetings. It doesn't have to be at the very top. It can be at peer level, or if you're close with the top, definitely try to get to the top from a learning perspective. And also, if you look at your career, don't shy away from horizontal moves. One of the best CFOs I've ever worked with, I think he must have spent half of his time not in the CFO organization. So, and that was his strength. He truly understood how his organization could make a difference to the entire organization. So the more you get good at that, people are going to value you, and that is and that also opens up doors for you to get into other parts of the organization. Because the higher up you go, the more you have to be a generalist, right? So, or understand more of the end-to-end business. And the third one is perhaps, do double down on that soft side. It starts with self-awareness. So to make sure that you do understand your strengths and your weaknesses and so double down on improving your strengths, but also maybe tackle something you're not so good at every now and then. So you also know what kind of teams to build around you. I mean, someone who's not detail oriented, like myself, I always make sure that I have someone who is detail oriented in my team. And they will know if they're listening that I truly value whenever they challenge me on that. And that resonates also what I see in teams. When I see real successful leaders, know exactly what they're good at and what they're not so good at, build those teams around them, and adjust. They need to understand what each context, and again, as I've spoke about before, in the ambiguous world we're living in, that changes faster than themselves probably. So they need to know what they're always building for.
Am I wrong when I presume that the third trait is the most difficult for many people?
You just need to do it, and probably go in with some humility into it, knowing that it's fun because we get very often asked when we discuss what kind of people we're looking for after understanding the outcome and how they get there and all these things. Then it tends to be that final comment and someone with low ego.
Yeah.
So customers know that someone who thinks their solution to everything is not going to work. Like, even if they are the best in what they're doing, let's say in a specific field, the world is too complex and changes too fast these days for one-trick ponies. You need to equip yourself and you need to equip the company you're working for, the organization you're working for, with readiness for whatever may come. So it's not, it's a strength getting into that. So I think that maybe that's what I want to try to, people who have not spent so much time of self-awareness exercises, to dedicate the time, it is worth it. You can't lose.
This may be, of course, let's say, a topic which especially came into the focus for the last 10, 15 years. I'm not really sure if there were some self-awareness discussions in the 70s and 80s in leadership circles. At least not at that level as
Maybe they were
today.
discussed, but for sure the people who were successful were.
Yeah, exactly. But when you look at what's going around with Gen Z coming in, with everything about the demands and about the expectations onto leadership quite evolving and changing and so on, where do you see the biggest changes, for example, in contrast to 15 years ago? What is now different, and what probably will be in 10, 15 years the things that will be, and the character traits and the assets that you bring with you in highest demand, so that especially younger talent now can already concentrate, maybe not concentrate, but focus to win these parameters, traits, assets for themselves to be then at the right spots in the next 10 to 15 years.
So if we start by looking back, for sure. So as I mentioned before, we do this leadership style assessment of all the executives that we assess. So we must be closer to 30,000 now results of these executives over time. In kind of what drives them, what are they good at, how are they perceived, and how do they see themselves? And again, we can benchmark that against the success of these executives. And one thing we've seen in general as a meta move is that it has gone, so people who were successful and people who were appointed, so desired by the market, have gone from people who are results oriented and control things, and generalized like that, and is moving towards a results orientation still, but a learning focus. So constantly looking out for what's happening, what else are people doing, what are companies doing, what can we learn, what can we do different, consistently pushing that boundary. So this is like, and it was good if I control everything, and I make sure it like that this follow the processes, it follows the rules. Like we have to do this. This what like this works versus this could work maybe. That we see a meta movement of not just who's successful, but also who's desired, and who gets chosen. So if there's anything like leaning into that learning agility is a good thing to do. And if people are not used to that, there are two things I would say. You can still gravitate towards roles and environments that are still quite control oriented. For example, when we have operational directors or operational officers for nuclear plants, I don't want someone who goes out and tests widely of a fail fast approach. We want people who are very controlled in what they're testing. We also see from like a banking perspective, this fail fast approach didn't really work. It put a lot of people in orange jumpsuits.
Exactly.
So there are environments that are not as prone for regulatory and safety and whatever good reasons to a fail fast approach, but understand what learning agility means in your context is a good idea, and to lean into that and understand where your kind of learning ability or desire fits well. So we know, of course, that some technology companies are much more fail fast and quicker on this stuff than maybe a nuclear plant, right?
Yeah.
But if you're really good at making sure that everything always works and nothing fails ever, then I think you should check out the energy sector. It's quite interesting. It's very, however, very prone to change at the moment. And then the other part I'd say that we see, if you then look forward, I have a colleague who's done some really interesting research around this. Also, the impact of AI, of course, we can't get away from that. And we see that expertise areas are going to be much easier to access now. But to be able to connect it and zoom out to the strategic intent and focus and drive is not as easy to do with AI, perhaps, in the context of the physical world you're working in. So we do see it when we look forward in an exercise, also when it comes to CEO succession, we tend to look at what leaders do you need in the future? And we need to start building the team for that. One of the part there comes up consistently is this, a generalist who can bring the expertise areas together, whether that's through an agent or a person or whatever it might be, robots in a lot of parts of our industries, especially in this part of Europe. And we want to see that. And the other part on the AI topic was interesting when we compared our experiences around the globe. We had round tables across the world, gathering CHROs from all industries. We had one in Asia, we had one here in Europe, and we had one in the US. We asked them, how much do you think AI is going to disrupt the workforce for you in the next 5 to 10 years? Not a shocking experience or answer, but what came back was in the Asian roundtable, they said about 80%. US around 50%. Blue collar and white collar, by the way. So they looked at across the organization. And in Europe, it was 20%.
No. Jesus.
Not a shocker. We know this.
Yeah.
But,
I
but it's
expected that,
fascinating.
unfortunately.
So again, to your point and the name of your show, when it comes to transformation, the appetite and what is considered transformation, in this case, the difference between 80 and 20%.
Yeah. But this is an interesting point that you bring in, because especially, of course, in Europe, but especially in Germany, we have or we are challenged in general and also in our industry that where I'm in, about the things that we are heavily under pressure economically, of course, and the companies that we have are in many cases still best in class, but either in shrinking markets or in technologies of the 19th and 20th centuries. So do you still see there differences in the kind of leadership style and the kind of attitude that you see in there in contrast, if you take Europe in contrast to Asia and the US? Because in the end, every company, every organization is just in a certain way a mirror of the leadership style they have there plus their culture.
Yeah, and I think what we touched upon earlier, you need to represent and reflect your market. And I know in 2022, when the invasion of Ukraine happened, we saw a shift, for example, when it came to the role of technology leaders, the requirements and the outcome they were supposed to achieve was definitely cost cutting, and more so than before. It's always a part of a technology leader's role, but it became heavier, and to be able to have a flexible cost base. And that was a reaction to, we don't know what's going to happen. So, which was the case. In other markets where we see that rapid growth areas, for example, I'm working with a client right now that is heavily invested to the Middle East and Southeast Asia, which is rapidly growing countries. And they want someone who's experienced 50 to 100% growth.
Yeah.
And someone who has only experienced up to 20% growth, it might sound great to know a lot about growth, but if you actually are doubling year over year, everything changes every quarter.
Yeah.
There's not the same organizational memory that you can cling on to. Not everyone likes that, and that's okay, but know what you want and what you're good at and what you enjoy. So coming back to Europe on that part, there are rapidly growing organizations here too. It just depends on which industry you're looking at. Of course, I know that the automotive industry, although I'm not an expert at it, is struggling. But on the other side, we see quite a large uptick for European presence and the European alternatives when it comes to sovereignty selections. So that is growing. Also, when it comes to the field of robotics and physical AI, which is a super exciting, booming area, Europe is not a terrible choice for a lot of companies when it comes to this. So that is growing rapidly. So I think the part that is unique for me, perhaps European and Asian leaders or APAC, when there's a big presence across APAC, would be the ability to deal with all those different cultures and regulations, etc., that comes with the nature of the environment they operate in. But there are some meta patterns that are true across the globe. And that comes back to this person who is has a great self-awareness, great conceptual strategic thinking, and is real good interpersonally to deal with people and enable the team. That no matter where we go, it keeps coming back. And also when we place people with these strengths, we see how they consistently outperform. Actually, a colleague of mine again, he did a really interesting research of comparing our placements with average market performance. And we found that this skip level appointments that we had appointed, that we assessed were really strong at these things, outperformed the industry average of established CEOs, which is quite a wonderful insight to your point earlier of expertise over agility.
How can you make these kind of things endure? Because one of the topics we in the past also have often spoken was the thing of succession, which I think is quite interesting, because if you look into the economy, you have several examples like Apple, for example. They had this kind of succession topic with Tim Cook stepping in, and the future was bright for them. Others seem not to have such a good hand about this, where basically a company's long-term struggle starts with succession. Yeah, when, for example, the founder or the big person who was dominating the company either took the wrong decision concerning succession or stepped back, but really did not manage to step back really, and still, let's say, tries to fiddle a little bit around on the politics and the strategy of a company. that it's a thing that most companies get wrong. And why do you think so many companies struggle with succession at senior levels? And what do those who do not struggle with this do better than others?
Yeah, love this area. It's so fascinating. And you're absolutely right that the most companies, so I mean, obviously there are more. If you look at this, someone like Apple, of course, they take a super professional approach to this. They would, because I mean, the biggest companies, if you think about the top 10 in the world, top 50 in the world, the likelihood that they deal with it very professionally is more likely.
Yeah.
But the vast quantity of companies, they treat succession as an emergency process instead of a leadership process. And I think why that is I think there's some trends we see with regards to it. It is a sensitive topic. If you just approach it like that, like dear CEO, dear CFO, whichever we're talking about, dear board members, we think it's time to start preparing for some alternatives for yourself. It's a difficult one. It's sensitive. Like, am I doing something wrong? Do I feel threatened? So it's a sensitive. So what we see when companies do this right, you have to start with, it's not about replacing people. It's about preparing the organization for the future. And let's be also fair. It might not be the company pushing the CEO or the CXO out. It might be them leaving for another role.
Yeah.
And it's only responsible by the company to ensure the survival of the company and all its employees that are dependent on them and all their customers that are dependent on them to have a proper succession plan in place. So I think the very foundational why should be seen as we're preparing the organization for the future, we're not replacing you or anyone else. But it's our responsibility to take care of our customers, our company, and our employees. So therefore, we need to plan for this. And then how they do that well, I mean, if I look at companies who do this really well, and our CEO practice has an incredible framework for this. But they will start with looking at what kind of leaders do we need to have in 5 years' time? And that depends on what do we need to be able to do the outcome again? What are we going to be able to do in 5 years' time, 10 years, whatever, or 3 years, depending on how fast your industry moves? What do those leaders look like? And you can have an assessment of how does that compare to what we have today. But then you want to start looking at, okay, most of the times that exercise, you will see there is a gap. But it's okay, we have time. Again, this is the good thing about doing this systematically. And then they should be looking at what does that mean for the different domains, for the CEO, for the board. And then you will look at where do these people exist in the company, within our company and outside our company. And companies, and this is maybe where big companies have a bit more resources and time and structure to handle it, but small companies can do this too. Maybe not, they don't need to track as many. But you want to understand for each domain, for each role, what does your option looks like out there and inside in here? And if they're internal, and you want to look at it, who's ready now, who's ready next? So for the internal one, you can play chess with them. Like this person shows a lot of those abilities that we're looking for, but they don't have any financial experience or they don't have any operational experience.
Yeah.
Could we suggest that they move somewhere else just to gain that? And then they will be more ready for one step up or 2 steps up. And the same for the external ones. We're going to see who is ready now, who's ready next. So if someone leaves today, if someone falls off the branch today, who could we call right away? And from this perspective, the company can also see in terms of, you also get an understanding of what does talent cost today. So you also know if your internal ones are likely to be taken away because we actually don't pay so well, or we're actually paying extremely well. So we can actually play a bit with people who are not so committed to the new future, who is underperforming. So it really is about putting the board and the leadership team in a position of choice, when and how and who to move on with. And then that at the end comes into a decision of actually finding, like negotiating with the right people and getting the right people in place and make sure they are set up for success afterwards.
It's interesting what you say about this, because I've seen it myself quite a lot, that highly successful companies then really start to lose their mojo, jump the shark, or whatever you want to call it, at exactly that moment, because a very, very able founder who turned that company to a success story completely screwed up that decision.
Yeah.
And that process. And you see this on a daily basis. Caroline, thank you very much for being part of this. And thank you very much for this great conversation.
Pleasure. Thank you for having me.
If people want to get in contact with you because they enjoyed the conversation so much that they want to continue that conversation with you for themselves, what's the best way to get in touch with you?
And the easiest way is to find me on LinkedIn. You can drop me a message there. If you're in Zurich, let me know.
Perfect. Caroline, looking
Thanks so much,
forward to our next endeavor. See you.
Same here.